The first night, the rain fell in sheets, turning the city streets into rivers of filth. Samuel Reed kept his head down as he ran, clutching the crumpled grocery bag tighter against his chest. Inside, 2 cans of soup, a half loaf of bread, and a bottle of aspirin rattled together. Survival for another 2 days, if he was careful. Sirens wailed somewhere behind him, their cries bouncing between the empty concrete buildings like trapped ghosts. Another sweep, another roundup. It didn't matter that Samuel had receipts for the food. It didn't matter that he hadn't stolen anything. In this part of town, in 1992, the badge decided the truth. He ducked into an alleyway, heart pounding against his ribs. Trash bins overflowed around him, and the stink of wet cardboard and old urine clung to the air. Samuel crouched low, pressing his back against the crumbling brick wall. Just breathe. Just wait. Let them pass. He didn't see the second squad. Heavy boots slammed into the alley from both ends, shouting commands that blurred into noise. Before he could even raise his hands, they were on him. A baton cracked against his knee, a boot in his ribs. Samuel dropped the grocery bag. The cans clattered and rolled into puddles. A knee pressed into the side of his face, grinding his cheek into the broken asphalt. Got another one, someone grunted. No ID, no papers, just another ghost. He tried to speak, tried to tell them his name, his address, the tiny apartment he shared with 2 other men above the laundromat. But the words drowned in the rain. Handcuffs snapped around his wrists, biting into skin. A plastic bag was yanked over his head, and the world shrank to darkness and pain. They called it a processing error. The kind of phrase that could erase a man's entire life in 6 syllables. Samuel wasn't booked under his real name. Someone, a clerk, a guard, a system stretched too thin to care, assigned him a number instead. Number 746021. The paperwork said he was a transfer from another prison, an inmate serving an undisclosed sentence for an undisclosed crime. By the time they realized a mistake, if they realized it all, he would be long forgotten, buried alive in steel and concrete. Another ghost, another forgotten cell. Cell block he smelled of bleach and old blood. The overhead lights buzzed constantly, too bright, too white, burning into Samuel's skull. He slept when he could, curled against the far wall like an animal, blanket wrapped tight around his shoulders. They gave him a jumpsuit 2 sizes too large. 1 plastic spoon, 1 cup, no visitors, no mail, no name. At night, the other inmates howled in the dark, curses, prayers, confessions twisted by madness. Samuel stayed silent. He learned quickly that questions got you beat, that asking for your file earned you disciplinary, that crying earned you worse. He stitched his voice shut with fear, and waited. Year 1 bled into year 2, then 3, then 10. The days became repetition. Wake up to blinding lights. Shovel down watery oatmeal. March to the yard for 1 hour of silent pacing. Return to the cell. Sleep. Repeat. Sometimes new inmates came in, shouting about lawyers, about rights. Samuel watched them from behind dead eyes. Most broke within months. Some disappeared. No one asked where they went. You learned to bury curiosity deeper than hunger. After 15 years, Samuel barely recognized a reflection in the cracked mirror above the rusted sink. Hollow cheeks, graying hair buzzed close to the scalp, eyes that didn't blink unless forced. He barely remembered the apartment above the laundromat, barely remembered the taste of real bread, the feel of sunlight without a chain pulling at his ankle. Only one thing stayed sharp. I don't belong here. He clung to it like a knife hidden under the mattress. Silent, cold, waiting. The routine of ghosts. Inmates came and went. Guards rotated out. Wings of the prison were repainted, relabeled, reorganized. But Samuel remained, a ghost stitched into the bricks. He stopped marking time. At first, he scratched days into the wall, tiny ticks in a hidden corner behind the toilet. After year 5, he lost count. After year 10, he stopped caring. He no longer tried to ask questions. New guards sometimes paused when they saw his file, confused by how little information it contained. No transfer history, no trial records, just a number. Number 746021. When they asked supervisors, the answers were always the same. Old case. Ancient paperwork. Forget it. And they did. Around year 17, Samuel's mind began to betray him. Dreams became more real than days. He dreamt of open windows and soft beds, of the smell of cinnamon bread baking downstairs, of hands, small and warm, tugging at his shirt, calling him home. Sometimes he woke up and wept, gasping against the choking dark. Sometimes he didn't wake up at all, not fully, walked through his hour half-dead, half-dreaming. There were days he forgot his own name, where he believed he was someone else, a construction worker, a teacher, a priest. 1,000 false lives stacked on top of the one he lost. But always, like a splinter under skin, one thought festered. I don't belong here. Year 29. An ordinary Tuesday. In a crumbling administrative building connected to the prison by rusted underground tunnels, a young intake clerk named Elena Merrow sipped cheap coffee and fought sleep. Her job was thankless. Archive old files. Process new inmate entries. Delete transfers from the system when prisoners died. She was good at it. Quiet. Efficient. Invisible. That morning, she received an order to purge files from the Forgotten Wing, Cell Block E, scheduled for demolition by the end of the year. She grumbled but got to work. File after file passed through her hands. Murders, arsons, traffickers, until she found it. A thin manila folder with a number instead of a name, number 746021. Curious, she flipped it open. What she found made her stomach turn cold. No original intake form. No sentencing document. No trial transcript. Just a transfer order from a prison that never existed. Her fingers trembled. She dug deeper, pulling records from 3 different systems. Cross-referencing. Confirming. There was no official record that number 746021 was ever legally incarcerated. No crime. No judge. No lawyer. Just forgotten. Buried. Elena stared at the file for a long time. At the booking photo, a younger man with haunted eyes, cuffed and hollow. A sticky note glued to the side from decades earlier. Hold. Do not transfer until review. It had never been reviewed. It had never been revisited. Samuel Reed had been lost for almost 3 decades because someone forgot or wanted to forget, and no one had ever cared. Until now. At first, Elena thought it had to be a mistake. Some clerical glitch, some ancient computer system failure. She submitted a request for confirmation through the normal channels. No response. 2 days later, she tried again, higher up this time, filing a formal report to the warden's office. The next morning, her supervisor summoned her. A man she'd never met before, not the usual chain of command. He was tall, too neat, in a gray suit that didn't quite fit the peeling office walls. No name tag. No smile. You're mistaken, he said without sitting down. Old paperwork. Computer error. Forget it. She tried to explain. Tried to show him the gaps, the missing trial record, the missing sentencing document. He cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. Forget it, he repeated, lower this time. She nodded, smiled, went back to her desk, and started digging. What Elena found made her sick. Samuel Reed wasn't an isolated case. He was the tip of a rot that stretched deep into the prison's bones. Old sweeps from the early 1990s, designed to clean up the poorest neighborhoods, had flooded the system with thousands of arrests. Too many bodies. Too few records. Mistakes happened. Some were corrected. Others, conveniently ignored. Files misplaced. Identities swapped. Ghost prisoners created to fill quotas and balance budgets. Somebody made a lot of money off it. And nobody had ever been held responsible, because nobody ever looked. The more Elena uncovered, the more dangerous things became. Her locker at work was broken into, nothing stolen, just rifled through. Anonymous notes slipped into her car windshield. Stop digging. Her apartment door left ajar one night, just wide enough to whisper, "We can find you anywhere." The message was clear. Drop it, or disappear. But Elena wasn't built for fear. Not anymore. She remembered her own brother, arrested at 17 for a crime he didn't commit, lost to a private prison hundreds of miles away. She had been too young to help him then. She wasn't too young now. Samuel didn't know any of this. His world remained 4 cinder-block walls and 30 minutes of yard time a day. But something was different. The guard started watching him more closely, taking notes when he moved, whispering behind clipboards. One even called him by name, Reed, for the first time in decades. Samuel didn't react, didn't dare, but inside, something old and sharp stirred. Hope. Hope was dangerous. It got you beaten, got you killed. But this was different. It felt heavy, solid, like the door of his tomb had shifted, even if just an inch. Elena knew the normal channels were blocked, so she went outside, to the media. Quietly, through encrypted emails and burner phones, she contacted an investigative journalist named Martin DeWitt, famous for exposing systemic abuses. Martin was skeptical at first. Another wrongly imprisoned story? Another bureaucratic sob fest? But when Elena sent him the documents, the forged intake, the missing trial, the handwritten hold until review order from 30 years ago, he stopped doubting. He started planning. The article hit the front page of the State Tribune on a Monday morning. The ghost prisoner, how one man was buried alive by the system. Shockwaves tore through the state. Activists rallied. Politicians fumbled through press conferences. Legal teams mobilized. The Department of Corrections scrambled to control the narrative. Too late. Freedom was coming for Samuel Reed. At last. The release. They didn't tell him until the morning it happened. A guard, one Samuel didn't recognize, came to the cell door. Keys jingled. The bolt screamed against rust as it slid back for the first time in decades. The guard said nothing, just jerked his chin. Samuel hesitated. Was this another punishment? Another trick? But the door stood open. The first time in 30 years. He stepped out. His legs, frail and aching, barely remembered how to move without shackles. They processed him out the same way they process packages. Cold, mechanical, indifferent. He signed a form he couldn't read. They gave him a brown paper bag. One set of gray civilian clothes 3 sizes too big. A voucher for a bus ticket. $40 in small bills. No apology. No explanation. No one met him at the gates. Just the sun, blinding and hot, and the sound of the world he no longer recognized roaring in his ears. Outside, everything had changed. Buildings stretched higher. Cars looked like spaceships. People walked with glowing rectangles pressed to their faces. Lost in digital worlds Samuel couldn't even begin to understand. He stumbled into the bus station, sat down on a cold plastic bench, watched the tide of humanity move past him without a second glance. Samuel didn't exist to them. Not a man. Not even a ghost. Just an empty space between breathing things. He used the $40 to buy a burger and a bottle of water. A stranger's kindness gave him a battered blanket. He slept under an overpass that smelled of piss and hopelessness. Dreamt of wolves. Dreamt of screams. Dreamt of the lights buzzing overhead. When he woke, a bus ticket to the city lay tucked under his blanket. No note. No name. Just a single, tiny mercy. He took it. Elena found him 3 days later, sitting on the steps of a library, watching pigeons fight over crumbs. She approached cautiously, a small figure in jeans and a hoodie, clutching a battered messenger bag full of papers and truths. Samuel looked up. Their eyes met. No words needed. She sat beside him, offered a coffee. He took it with trembling hands. For a long time, they just sat there, 2 survivors of different kinds of wars. Finally, Elena spoke. My name's Elena. I'm here to help. Samuel said nothing, but he didn't walk away. Freedom was not simple, not in a world that forgot you existed. Samuel had no ID, no social security number, no medical records. To the system, he was a ghost. And some people, powerful people, wanted it to stay that way. Within weeks of his release, threats began. Anonymous letters slipped under Elena's door. Surveillance vans parked across from her apartment. Men in suits offering hush money if they both agreed to move on quietly. Elena refused. Samuel stayed silent, but the rage boiled inside him. They had buried him once. They would not do it again. Elena partnered with civil rights attorneys, filed a lawsuit against the Department of Corrections, the warden's office, the governor's legal counsel, anyone tied to the decades of negligence. They fought back viciously. Character assassinations, smear campaigns, whispers that Samuel was violent, unstable, a threat to society. After all, how do you defend a man who doesn't exist? But Elena was relentless. Each document she unearthed was a weapon. Each interview Samuel gave, quiet, devastating, turned public sympathy like a tide. The courts couldn't ignore them forever. Samuel's awakening. Winning in court wouldn't be enough. Samuel saw it now, clear and cold. The men who buried him weren't afraid of courtrooms. They weren't afraid of lawsuits or headlines. They were afraid of being exposed, dragged into the light they had avoided for decades. Samuel understood that if he truly wanted justice, he couldn't sit behind microphones or lawyers. He would have to take it. Quietly, precisely, the way they had taken everything from him. He started writing names. Late at night, curled in the corner of the shelter bed, cheap ballpoint pen scratching across the back of a diner napkin. Not the politicians or figureheads who would appear on TV. The real architects. Warden Ellis Rowe, who signed the intake papers. Deputy Marshal Clarence Boyd, who ran the sweep operations in '92. Administrator Linda Garrow, who shredded the evidence when the intake error was first discovered. 3 names. 3 debts. He didn't want their deaths. Death was too kind. He wanted them to live long enough to lose everything they built on his suffering. Elena thought he was adjusting, learning how to live outside. She didn't realize he was hunting. Samuel spent hours in libraries, learning how the world worked now, how to manipulate online records, how to build false identities, how to track people through public databases, social media, property records. The same system that buried him could be turned against itself. He watched tutorial videos in library computer labs, listened to podcasts about hacking and cyber warfare, took notes on the vulnerabilities of modern life. By the time the lawsuit trial date arrived, Samuel had built the bones of a new plan. Quiet, surgical, permanent. Ellis Rowe had retired 5 years earlier. A comfortable pension, a gated community, golf 3 times a week. He thought the past was buried under plaques and retirement parties. Samuel studied him first, learned his weaknesses, gambling debts hidden from his pristine reputation, an affair with a housekeeper at his country club, a hidden second mortgage nobody knew about. Samuel started small. Letters sent to the HOA about Rowe's inappropriate activities, anonymous packages to his wife, leaked copies of illicit bank statements to the club's ethics board. Within months, Rowe's life unraveled. Public humiliation followed. His wife left. His country club membership revoked. Pension stripped after an ethics investigation. The final blow came when a local paper ran the headline. Former warden at Center of Forgotten Prisoner Scandal. Rowe, too proud to endure the shame, moved into a grimy apartment downtown. Alone, irrelevant, forgotten, just like he had once tried to forget Samuel. Clarence Boyd thought himself untouchable. A decorated lawman, a man respected in every thin blue line circle from here to Washington. But Samuel found the cracks. Boyd's daughter, an activist now, fiercely critical of the very system her father once upheld. Boyd had kept it quiet, the shame of it, the arguments, the public fights. Samuel sent her a package. Not threats, not accusations, documents, proof of the mass sweep operations, proof of the quotas, proof of the bodies lost inside the machine Boyd built. The daughter went public within weeks, an emotional press conference where she disowned her father in front of a national audience. Boyd's medals meant nothing now. His legacy turned to ash. Linda Garrow's exile. Linda Garrow lived quietly in a mid-sized suburb, director of multiple nonprofits, speaker at women's leadership conferences, a pillar of community service. Samuel dug deeper, found the shredded transfer documents she had signed, the ones that consigned not just him, but dozens of others into administrative oblivion. He leaked them to investigative reporters anonymously. Within a month, Garrow was exposed. Funding dried up. Sponsors fled. Legal inquiries opened. She resigned in disgrace, a carefully worded press release that couldn't wash the bloodstains from her hands. Every night, Samuel sat in his one-room apartment. No pictures on the wall, no television, no books, just silence and a growing emptiness. Each revenge, each collapse left a hollow behind. Victory didn't fill him. It only sharpened the grief. What he wanted, the stolen years, the lost life, could never be reclaimed. He had won, and yet he had lost everything. The news cycle moved on. New scandals, new tragedies, new distractions. The faces of Roe, Boyd, and Garrow faded from headlines within weeks. Samuel Reed was no longer the story. No interviews, no memorials, no apologies. Just a 47-year-old man walking streets that had forgotten him, carrying the invisible weight of 3 stolen decades. Freedom felt more like a long hallway with no doors. No jobs, no family, no past. Just air too cold and light too bright. Elena's discovery. It was Elena who noticed first. The subtle changes. The way Samuel no longer asked about the lawsuit. No longer attended the meetings with lawyers. No longer mentioned justice with that soft, trembling hope she had once admired. Instead, he smiled too easily, listened too carefully, and disappeared for hours without explanation. One evening, Elena followed him, carefully, guilt riding her like a second skin. Samuel didn't go to therapy, didn't go to the park like he said he would. He went to a public records office, spent hours poring through old archives, government employee directories, tax filings, hunting. When he left, he carried a thin folder tucked under his jacket, face blank, body tense like a coiled wire. She waited for him outside his apartment. When he approached, she stepped into the light. "What are you doing, Sam?" He didn't pretend not to understand. Didn't lie. Just looked at her, really looked, the way you look at someone standing between you and survival. "Making sure they don't bury anyone else," he said. "That's not your job," Elena said, voice trembling. "The courts, the system, they're supposed to." Samuel laughed then, a hollow, broken sound that belonged more to cell block than to the outside world. "The system is a graveyard," he said. "You don't dig out of it. You burn it down." Samuel didn't tell Elena everything. He didn't have to. She already knew. He had something planned. Something bigger than just personal revenge. Something that would carve the truth into the world the way it had been carved into him. Irrevocable. Permanent. The final act. Over the following months, Samuel built his masterpiece. He hacked into forgotten archives. Compiled lists of every wrongful arrest from the sweet programs of the 90s. Cross-reference inmates still lost in the system. Still alive. Still screaming into the dark where no one heard. He created the ghost files. Thousands of pages of evidence. Photos. Handwritten notes, intake records, buried confessions, proof, real, heavy, impossible to ignore proof. And he didn't send it to a newspaper, or a court, or a senator. He leaked it online. All of it. No names redacted, no crimes hidden. The world woke up one morning to a firestorm. The ghost prisoners, a system built on lost souls. It spread like wildfire. Documentaries, investigations, resignations. Laws changed because of Samuel Reed. A monument was built in front of the state capitol, in memory of those the system forgot. His name wasn't on it. He didn't want it to be. Ghosts didn't need monuments. They needed vengeance. After the ghost files exploded across the country, Samuel vanished. No forwarding address. No interviews. No goodbyes. Some said he changed his name again. Some said he wandered off into the mountains and died alone. Some said he still watches. From the edges. From the shadows. Waiting. Because systems don't die easily. They grow back like weeds. And sometimes you need a ghost to burn the garden down again. In a forgotten diner off a cracked highway, a waitress refills a coffee cup for a silent man sitting alone at the corner booth. His hands are calloused. His eyes are hollow but sharp. He tips well. He says little. On the table beside him, folded neatly, is a newspaper. The headline reads, "State launches inquiry into new allegations of prison abuse." The man smiles. Not kindly, not cruelly, just knowingly. Because once you've survived the grave, once you've clawed your way back from the dirt they buried you in, you never stop digging. You never stop remembering. You become the last witness of a system that tried to erase you. And witnesses never sleep. They wait. The cost of truth. The world loved redemption stories, until they became inconvenient. At first, Samuel Reed was a media darling. Interviews, talk shows, magazine covers, the ghost who returned from the dead. But fame didn't love him back. He didn't smile enough, didn't cry on command, didn't tell reporters what they wanted to hear about forgiveness and healing. Samuel spoke only truth. The system isn't broken. It was built this way. Sponsors pulled out. Public sympathy dried up. The headlines turned. Ghost prisoner sued state. Now he wants more. Samuel Reed, hero opportunist. By the second year of freedom, Samuel was radioactive. Nobody wanted to be associated with a living reminder that America could bury a man alive for 30 years and call it a clerical error. Samuel knew the first leak wasn't enough. The ghost files exposed one system, one state, one group of monsters. But it was bigger than that. He spent nights downloading court dockets, days poring over old newspaper microfilms, months mapping where the bodies were buried, not literal graves, but legal ones. He found hundreds of cases, men and women warehoused for decades without proper trials, children aging into old men behind walls no one remembered existed. He compiled it all. This time, he didn't just leak it. He built a digital monument, ghostwitness.org. No names redacted, no past erased. A living, breathing archive of every injustice tied to the machine that had swallowed him. The site went viral overnight. Samuel expected outrage. Instead, he got silence. The system didn't fight him in public. They fought in the dark. Credit card declined mysteriously. Landlords pulling leases due to complaints. Elena receiving thinly veiled death threats in untraceable emails. One night, Samuel came home to find his apartment door kicked in. Nothing stolen. Just a message carved into the wall above his bed. Stay buried. He packed a bag that night. Burned everything he couldn't carry. Walked away without looking back. Helping Samuel had cost Elena everything. Her job at the Department of Corrections? Gone. Her professional reputation? Shredded. Friends turned cold. Family members urged her to move on. She received a settlement from a whistleblower protection lawsuit. Blood money to buy her silence. She refused. Started working nights at a diner. Days at a legal aid center. Trying to rebuild something real from the ashes. But she carried scars now, too. Not all prisons had walls. Some lived inside your skin forever. He became a ghost again. Not out of fear, but survival. Sleeping in abandoned buildings. Using fake names. Buying food in cash. He traveled from city to city, state to state, documenting new ghosts. Everywhere he went, the rot smelled the same. Missing intake forms. Prisoners listed under the wrong name. Solitary cells holding men who hadn't seen sunlight in decades. He didn't fight it through courts anymore. He fought with exposure. Every month, new files uploaded. New names remembered. New chains broken. The system fought back with silence. And Samuel learned to love that silence. Because in the quiet, he knew they were scared. On the 30th anniversary of his wrongful arrest, Samuel returned to the city where it all began. The old prison was gone, demolished under the weight of lawsuits and shame. In its place stood a gleaming new shopping mall. Families laughed. Children played. No one remembered the screams that once echoed under their feet. Samuel walked to the center of the courtyard, pulled a small box from his coat. Inside, a handful of scorched earth from cell block E, a piece of bent iron from his old bed frame. He placed it at the foot of the shiny Justice Plaza statue, a towering, hollow tribute to the same system that erased him. He didn't say a word, just turned and walked away. The cameras caught him briefly, a blurry figure disappearing into the misty morning. No one knew his name. No one cared. But somewhere, deep under the shiny new streets, the ghost stirred. And Samuel smiled, because they would never be forgotten again. Not while he remembered. The ghost movement. Samuel's digital archive didn't stay small. It grew, like infection, like wildfire. Within a year, dozens of volunteers began helping him, anonymously at first. Former paralegals burned out by broken court systems. Journalists tired of being muzzled by advertisers. Ex-convicts who had survived similar hells. They called themselves witnesses. They wore no uniforms, swore no oaths. But they did one thing relentlessly. They remembered. Every lost name they uncovered was posted. Every buried file was scanned. Every silent death was shouted back into the world. He never spoke publicly again. Never gave another interview. No Twitter. No podcasts. He became myth. Some said he was dead. Some said he lived off-grid in the Rockies, sending encrypted files from dusty libraries. Others claimed he still wandered city streets, a ghost with a cracked laptop and eyes that saw too much. Samuel didn't care about the stories. He only cared about the silence he shattered. But the system learned to, adapted, fought back in new ways. Instead of hiding injustices, they buried them under bureaucracy, new transparency commissions that buried real records under mountains of meaningless statistics, slick marketing campaigns about prison reform that changed nothing behind the walls, controlled opposition movements that diluted real anger into harmless petitions and branded T-shirts. Samuel watched, seethed, realized something deeper. You don't just fight monsters. You fight the idea that monsters exist at all. And ideas were harder to kill. Years passed. Samuel grew older. His hands shook sometimes when he typed. His knees ached when he walked too far. Scars the doctors couldn't explain bloomed along his lungs. Ghosts of decades inhaling mold and despair inside forgotten walls. Freedom was killing him slowly, but prison had done worse. He accepted the trade. Elena's legacy. Elena never abandoned the cause. Even after Samuel disappeared from public view, she carried the flame, teaching law students about wrongful imprisonment, building shelters for exonerated prisoners abandoned by the very system that stole their lives, publishing memoirs that weren't about fame, but about survival. Her name became a whisper too, not as loud as Samuel's legend, but steady, persistent, and sometimes, late at night, when she closed her laptop on another survivor's case, she wondered if somewhere out there Samuel still breathed, still remembered, still fought. Weeks later, hikers found a weather bag buried shallow under the oak. Inside, a battered laptop, still ticking with life. A flash drive labeled The Forgotten. A note, handwritten, simple. If you can read this, you are now a witness. Don't let them erase us again. No body was found. No grave was built, but the archive grew, and the witnesses multiplied. And somewhere, in places the law couldn't touch and money couldn't clean, Samuel Reed lived on, in every file uploaded, in every scream remembered, in every truth that refused to die. Asterisk, asterisk, they buried a man once. They forgot that bones remember. They forgot that memory rots slower than flesh. And in the end, it was a dead who won.